Hey folks, how's it hanging? It is your Rat Daddy here, and today, my friends, we are going to be surviving 100 days in Napoleonic RimWorld, among other mods as well. We're going to be starting with one handsome young lad known as Barley. All he has to his name are the clothes on his back and a pistol. And just as well, he's an abrasive psychopath who has a pretty mediocre skill set. First things first, the entirety of day 0 was spent cutting down trees, basically just collecting wood so we could build a shelter, but we didn't get to do that until the next day, so we ended up just building a nice campfire next to a little spot on the ground where we would be warm and cozy. Nothing says nice, safe, and warm like an open flame next to your sleeping body. The very next day after we awoke, we harvested some bear berries off a bear berry bush and ate them with our berry little mouth. But with that being said, as the sun began to sit low in the sky, we finally had enough wood to build ourselves a comfy small little cabin. It wasn't perfect, but at least it would protect us from predators and the elements of the forest. Speaking of the forest, we're always on the hunt for an easy meal, and I spotted a raccoon that appeared to have been killed by a red fox. This would be the perfect carcass for us to snack on. So naturally, Barley yanked it up by its tail, took it all the way back home where he would cut it up into little bits of steak fry with some peppers or something, I don't know, but we ate it. Then it was time for us to beautify our cabin just a tiny bit. We ended up making some nice wooden flooring, and we also put a stack of wood outside for good measure. We would also till some of the land next to our home in preparation for some rice fields, and we would also build a horseshoe ring, which was Barley's favorite and only form of recreation. Kind of depressing, really. I also wanted to try something a little bit different in this colony, so instead of building a dining hall right off the bat, I thought about just building something like a small gazebo where he could sit out, enjoy his meals by the table in the gazebo, and enjoy some nature as well. Of course, though, we're not going to have any meals if we don't start planting some crops, so we began with rice, as one does in a brand new RimWorld colony because it's so fast. We would also quickly end up building a storage facility to put all of our goodies. I went with a log building style for all of these, of course, but I also put some picket fences around them just because I think it made it look more beautiful, if you will, a little bit more gorgeous and a bit more homely and warm. But as the days began to pass, I realized that we would be experiencing a raid soon and we need a melee weapon just in case, so we deconstructed some ancient runes for their limestone, took that back home, and made a primitive axe that we can use to defend ourselves. It was nothing special, especially considering the pool of melee weapons I have installed through our mods and the possible melee weapons that our enemies could have, of course. Hey, speaking of which, we're about to find out. We were being raided by a local orc tribe. This time around, it looks like it was only one singular orc with a very badass sword. I wasn't stupid enough to go toe-to-toe with this orc with our primitive axe, so I settled for running away and firing at them from a distance, and eventually this did end up working and we shot the orc down, meaning now we have a beer, some jade, and an orcish sword. Some time later we had a little beggar girl come and ask us for some silver, and we ended up giving it to her, and thus far nothing ever really came of that. But we're good people nonetheless. We ended up having some British soldiers who were coming to do some trade with us, but a lion started hunting his deer that he was riding on and then began attacking him, and it was a whole ordeal where these two soldiers were fighting a lion. They both ended up dying, which was good news for us, because that means we could swoop in and take all of the things that they were willing to trade to us as our own. That lion really done all the work for us. After killing that silly kitty cat, we ended up turning it into a sandwich. Then we would begin hauling in all of our precious new items that we obtained from these dead soldiers, and then kick back in our gazebo with an ice-cold brewski. I also thought it might be a good idea to make some money off cash crops, so I built another small field where we would begin planting some coffee. Later on, we had a lad contact us who said he'd been chased out of his home by an ex-lover. He wanted to stay with us for 13 days. He would chip in around the colony, yada yada, so of course we accepted. And I'm glad that we did. Even though he has some horrible traits, he had some pretty good skills for the most part. We went ahead and started building something of a barracks area. That way we could have people like him who stay here temporarily, or even people that end up joining us in this little home for a while, and we tried to beautify it as best we could with picket fences and all the usual stuff. We ended up building yet another field for some tobacco so we could get more money off this cash crop as well. The new guy ended up asking if he could join us, and we were so pleased with the work that he'd been doing thus far, we accepted. I smell a beautiful friendship beginning to blossom. Barley and Halorift would do everything together, mining steel, deconstructing ancient ruins, truly best pals. Halorift also ended up finally taming a young rat nearby, and we ended up giving it the name of Dorito. Now that we're officially a colony of 2 as well, I decided to build a beautiful grand dining hall that was complete with a wood stove made of cast iron. We of course also needed a small place to store all our food. Sometime later it was also finally time for our very first harvest of tobacco crops, which we would quickly load up onto Barley along with some other things, and he would take them off to a nearby settlement to begin selling things for money. But not only did we make money, we also bought a beautiful blue coat for our new friend Halorift as a sign of good faith and love and friendship, of course. We ended up building a comfy little bed for Dorito to lay on at night, and then finally, boys and girls, it is day 25, and in typical Rat Night fashion, that means we're going to have a custom-made boss battle. Now throughout this video, a good portion of the bosses that will be battling are actually creatures. They're not really people or anything like that, the first of which is going to be this massive man-hunting yeti. He's hairy as shit and twice as tough, so let's get this shit started, baby. Obviously, as one might imagine, the yeti began chasing us, and we went with the tried and true method of running away while also firing upon him as he chased after us. We managed to get a few lucky shots in, and after a few more lucky shots, we eventually took the yeti down, and then we surrounded him before finally finishing him off. Now, of course, I didn't want all this yeti meat to go to waste, but after we butchered him, he gave us human meat. We didn't have a debuff from it, but we weren't going to eat it. Some time later, we ended up having a wanderer named Lynx offer to join us, no strings attached, so of course we accepted that shit full force as quick as possible because we need as many hands as we can get. As you could see there, she wasn't very good at most things, but she had about the same cooking skill as Barley, so we put her on cooking duty, and she mostly handled making all this coffee that we would end up drinking as well as selling. We also ended up having a raid from a tribe of impids. They weren't too impressive, except one had some plate armor and was dual-wielding flintlock pistols, which was a teeny tiny bit concerning, of course. We quickly killed the one that was wielding the club and then tried taking on the one wielding the pistols. I felt it would be best if we went into melee combat against her because those pistols would take our eyeballs out of our heads if we weren't too careful, and eventually this ended up killing her. We would then end up putting a good bit of focus into our cash crops, so we started rolling up some cigars out of all the tobacco leaves that we had, and then we would send Barley out to make some trades with these cigars as well as the coffee that we had made previously. He ended up returning sometime later, and he had quite the investment in his inventory. We had bought 2 owl bear eggs. Owl bears are some pretty large and powerful creatures, and we have these 2 eggs hatching in several days, which will mean that we will have 2 owl bears. We also ended up needing to put some focus into a production room / workshop. Unfortunately though, while building this was interrupted by a mad muffalo, but we quickly took care of it. And then finally, after days of waiting, our owl bears had hatched. We were parents, we were papas of beautiful owl bear babies that were very hungry. Now this next part is a little bit unethical, but we ended up purchasing a orc slave off of a slaver. This guy was pretty good at animals and handling and whatnot, and he would be perfect to take care of our owl bears. It was honestly very lucky that we ended up purchasing him because I think the owl bears needed a skill of 8 and the highest that we had was 7. As the beautiful snow was falling upon the ground though, I realized that our food storage was getting a teeny tiny bit low on food, so we found a mega sloth to hunt from a distance with our pistioles, and we ended up killing it to eat. We would of course use the majority of its meat for our food, but we would actually mount its head on a slab of wood and beautify our rooms. Not long after that though, we would end up having yet another filthy group of orcs raiding us. Thankfully though, these smelly green fools were coming from the southern section of our territory, so they would be funneled in between 2 mountains where we could fire at them, but they were coming so fast that we didn't really have a chance to do that, and they began attacking us. Unfortunately, they downed Halorift very quickly, but we began firing upon them, focusing on one at a time, and eventually they began to flee, and we survived, thank God. We quickly started tending to our wounded and tried to put out a fire that the damn orcs started in our food storage area. If we weren't low on food before, we definitely were now, but we didn't lose too much, I don't believe. We ended up having a quest come up though that was called Myers' Secret. We had Myers coming from nearby with an unknown threat following him. He wouldn't tell us what it was, but of course we accepted because we need the manpower. Myers was a beautiful slowpoke with one hell of a mining skill, but not much else. But we gave him a bow and an orcish battle axe and sent him on his way. However, you may notice that he has a tiny brown hand. You're probably wondering why. Well, my friends, he actually has a wooden hand. I don't know, I just thought it was cool. Since things were becoming a bit crowded with the living quarters situation, I decided to kind of commission a new barracks be built where we would keep some slaves. I don't know, I built too many beds for them. We don't plan on having this many slaves, but I guess in case we have them. I also built a section for prisoners as well. Although looking back on the footage now, after playing a bit more, I'm really glad that I built this, and you'll see why later. But my friends, with that being said, it is now day 50. Yes, we're halfway there. Oh, we're halfway. I'm not gonna sing. But it is time for yet another boss battle. We are once again going with some sort of mythical badass creature. This time it is a wyvern, basically a dragon that's going to kick our ass and just try to slaughter us. You know how dragons are. I'm not gonna lie to you, I kind of started to regret this after doing it, but it was too late after that. The dragon immediately began coming for us, the wyvern I mean to say, and of course we began firing at it as quickly as we could while trying to run away. Because as you probably noticed there with your keen eyes, a smack or two could kill our colonist, and unfortunately it did kill one of them already. Luckily though, a few shots from our weapons managed to stun the beast several times, and when it was stunned we could fire at it more. Eventually we took it down, surrounded it, and we would finally finish it off. But unfortunately, of course, this victory was not free. We lost Halorift, our good friend, our first friend, and our best friend. His loss was devastating to the entire colony, but especially to Barley. Thankfully, by killing the wyvern and butchering it though, we would be able to replenish our meat supply in our food storage area for the most part. We would also then begin working on something of a mausoleum or a crypt/tomb for Halorift's corpse. And of course, I am very much hoping that he is the only one we have to bury here. And even though we ended up having a good bit of meat from the wyvern battle, I decided to go out and hunt some giraffe. I don't know why they're here in this cold area, but who cares, we're going to eat them. Sometime later, we had been storing stone blocks for a while. We had cut them up and we just had a shit ton in our storage area, of course. So I decided that I was going to build something like a fortification around our colony, some almost like castle walls or something like that. And this took an extremely long time. For a while, I only had Barley working on it, and Myers has a horrible construction skill, but I put him on it so we could try to finish it faster. However, of course, before we could even think about completing our walls, we had a faction assault. Now, we're not under attack, but we actually have the Prussians and the Imp tribes that are going to be going to war here in our territory. They're not looking to fight us, thankfully, but they're going to kill each other. And that is immediately what they began doing. Now, of course, the Prussians have better technology. For the most part, they have more flintlock weaponry and rifles and things like that, but the Impids, of course, breathe fire, so you could imagine who ended up winning at the end of the night. But with that massive battle completed, we would continue our work on our fortified walls, as well as taking in some of the weapons and whatnot that the Prussians and Impids dropped. Speaking of battles once again though, the orcs are back, and they are once again out for our sweet, succulent, creamy blood. Oh, that sounds terrible. Things would end up being a bit chaotic, of course. Many of the orcs had melee weapons, so we didn't really have the opportunity to kind of stand behind our defenses and fire at them. Luckily though, we released our owl bears upon them. But unfortunately, even they would fall to the might of these orcs, and it was once again solely up to our colonists, who also were kind of getting their asses handed to them, but eventually we had killed enough of the orcs that they decided to flee, so we quickly ran into one of the open towers in our wall to hide from them as they ran away. Phew, let me tell you, those orcs are some tough sons of bitches. Unfortunately, those damn dirty orcs also started a massive fire in our barracks as well as our warehouse, ruining both of them. I was unable to put those out before they destroyed everything. But Barley and the other townsfolk didn't seem to mind, as they were still in pretty high spirits, throwing a party to try and cheer everyone up, I suppose, and it seemed to work. Sometime later, I decided that we would immediately begin trying to fix the storage area, as it was very crucial to, well, our storage, obviously. And it wouldn't be a Rat Night video if I didn't show a few clips of me working on the roads around our base to maximize efficient mobility, of course, as always. And of course, with day 75 creeping up upon us sooner than later, I also began building some wooden spike traps at both of our entrances. I also noticed that our townspeople were not drinking the coffee we were making, so I set it up that they would be doing that because it actually increases consciousness, manipulation, talking, eating. And finally, one of the last structures we would build before day 75 was actually something of a place of worship where we could have drum parties and ceremonies and things like that. It just seemed fitting, seeing how this is supposed to be during the Napoleonic years and whatnot, and of course we broke it in with a proper drum party and everyone was having a blast, but unfortunately it turned out to be boring. I don't know. But my friends, just like a flash of lightning from the sky, it is already day 75. I know, I can't believe we've made it 3/4 of the way there. And of course, time for another boss battle. This time around, we are once again going with yet another mystical, magical beast creature thing. This one is called a Gorgon, or Gorgon? I don't know, but the mod describes it as a creature in the shape of a cow with a huge body. It's said to have metal-like leather and eyes that can kill creatures. So regardless of the outcome, I suppose this should be quite interesting. This massive metallic beast immediately ran through several of our traps while we were shooting at it and barely took any damage at all. We released our owl bears upon it, which kind of slowed it down while we shot at it. Thankfully, the combination of our massive owl bear attacks as well as several barrages of bullets finally took it down. We swept in and finished it off, and day 75's raid was over. Reduced once again to nothing more than a carcass on our butchering block, but this time around we ended up getting some metallic substances instead of actual meat, which was, I guess, accurate. This once again proves, though, that our owl bears were a worthy investment, a really good investment, because they just keep saving our asses, to be honest with you. Sometime later, the unknown threat that was following Myers turned out to be an orc with dual-wielding axes named Dan with a stone skin gland, so this should also be very interesting. Shocking to no one, most likely, he, just like the giant metallic bull, tanked many of our traps and was caught by our owl bears just at the entrance, where we would begin shooting at him as well, and he eventually would die. However, unlike the metallic bull, he had a really sweet-ass hat, and yes, I know it's tainted and is going to cause a mood debuff, but I really like it, so Barley wore it. Speaking of Barley, he was the only one that was worth a shit at research, so we actually had him commissioned to build a small building for a research area, and then we actually commissioned him to do some research, eventually researching cannons. Needless to say that this research would be invaluable. It is honestly very useful for us to have cannons so we can fire at things from a distance with a big old boom. We had a trader come by at one point and they actually had a stallion, so we traded them some coffee and whatnot for said horsey, and I really liked it, I did, and I ended up naming it Squid. At one point we received an offer from the Prussians stating that if we destroyed an impid camp nearby they would actually give us a free colonist, so of course we accepted, and then we would begin traveling to said camp to kick the shit out of these impids. There appeared to only be 3 of them. They had bow and arrows, of course they did breathe fire, but we had owl bears, baby, so we weren't scared. It was during this time that we would run around their base several times, basically playing peekaboo and ring around the rosy and other childlike games, eventually picking them off slowly but surely, except for one who began to flee, and we had completed the quest. We went inside their base, there was a little bit of gold, but that was about it. Back home, we received the colonist that was promised to us, and she was a snail? Or I guess more accurately, she was a slug creature? I don't really know, but I do know her traits were beautiful and repulsive, literally at the same time. Don't know how that's possible. What I do know, though, is that she really liked to watch Myers while he slept, which was, interesting. Once Barley and our orc slave had finally returned home, they brought with them an impid prisoner who we threw into our prison and then tried to recruit. Then for a brief period of time, we would actually focus on our defenses once more by building some cannons. I do want to say these aren't actually cannons, they're called pivot guns, but they're a form of cannon. I believe they just have a higher accuracy. Then, unfortunately, at one point, our orc slave decided to rebel, which made me very sad because he was really beginning to feel like part of the family. Unfortunately, though, Barley and Lynx rushed into the warehouse to put him down and shot his head clean off. Regardless of his betrayal, though, we really did love him like family, so we decided to build him his very own sarcophagus to lie his corpse in. Sad to say, though, that was not the end of the uprisings. Our impid prisoner went berserk and decided to try and escape as well. We swiftly took care of her, luckily, though. We tended to her wounds to keep her alive, but I really didn't know what to do with her since we're close to day 100 and she's nowhere near getting recruited, so I don't know. For the last few days leading up to day 100, I just kind of let our townsfolk enjoy themselves and enjoy each other's company by drinking some coffee, smoking some cigars together, really just having a good old time. Then it turned out I didn't even have to worry about trying to recruit our impid prisoner because they ended up dying from infection in their wounds that they sustained trying to escape. You know, it's a win-win situation. Not for them, though. Finally, though, my friends, we have done it. We have finally survived for 100 days in Napoleonic RimWorld, among many other mods, of course. But I'm very proud of this. I'm very proud proud of what we've done, but it is time for yet another boss battle, of course. For one last final boss battle, I decided to go with unicorns. I thought that might be interesting, so we have an entire herd of unicorns that we are going to have to fight off. Now, of course, for most boss battles that we've done thus far, I've only done like one creature, but this time around I went with a herd of creatures, mostly just because for these videos at the end, we tend to do these bigger, massive raids for the 100th day, because I normally don't anticipate surviving them. As you'll see in this long clip of us playing, though, I did actually end up defeating these unicorns. At the end of the day, we had a lot of injuries and almost many casualties, but we were victorious. I just want to thank you guys ever so much for watching. I love you guys so much. I really appreciate the support on the channel and these videos especially. I've been trying to get some of these 100 days videos out because I know everyone really enjoys them. Just been short on time recently. I normally am, but I'm trying my hardest. But thank you guys once again for watching, man. I love you guys so much. It means a lot to me that you guys really enjoy these videos, and you know, I'm very grateful for the support and stuff, and being able to entertain you guys and stuff like that. So, but I will see you in the next one. I love you. Goodbye.